35 stab wounds, rose petals scattered across the floor, and a killer caught on camera riding away on a bicycle wearing a mask after entering the victim's home with flowers in his hands. But what shocked investigators most wasn't the brutality of the murder. It was the reason behind it, because the man accused of killing her believed he was saving a child from a horrifying secret no one else could see. And by the time the truth finally surfaced, this case became far more disturbing than anyone imagined.
Violently murdered in her home, stabbed repeatedly, rose petals scattered across the scene.
On October 13, 2021, Christina Parcell walked into Valley Walk Animal Hospital in Greer, South Carolina, for what should have been a normal job interview. To the people around her, Christina seemed optimistic. Her life had finally begun stabilizing after years of chaos, legal battles, and emotional turmoil. She had recently regained custody rights involving her daughter after an exhausting fight in court. She was engaged to a wealthy retired engineer named Bradley Post, and according to friends and coworkers, she genuinely believed she was entering a better chapter of her life. Less than 1 hour later, Christina Parcell was dead. The crime scene investigators walked into that afternoon looked like something out of a nightmare. Christina had been stabbed over 30 times inside her own home. Blood covered the floors and walls. There were signs of a violent struggle everywhere. She had fought desperately to survive, and yet one detail made the scene even more unsettling. Rose petals had been scattered throughout the house. It didn't look random. It looked staged. Whoever killed Christina wanted investigators to see something. The immediate assumption was obvious. Crimes involving excessive stabbing are often deeply personal. 35 stab wounds suggested rage, passion, obsession, and the rose petals only reinforced the idea that Christina likely knew her killer. But investigators would soon discover something terrifying. The man accused of murdering Christina had reportedly never even spoken to her before. To understand how this case spiraled into one of the strangest true crime stories in South Carolina history, investigators had to go backward, long before the murder. Christina Parcell's life had already become deeply complicated years earlier. In 2010, Christina severed ties with her family after writing them a letter explaining that she wanted to remove anyone from her life who she believed did not offer pure and genuine love. The decision isolated her completely. For nearly 5 years, she had little to no contact with relatives. During this period, she reportedly worked through escort advertisement websites under the alias Caroline Warren, attempting to survive financially while disconnected from her previous life. It was during this time that she met John Joseph Melo. Melo was older than Christina by nearly 2 decades. A music producer originally from Massachusetts, he first encountered her through those online escort advertisements. But over time, their relationship evolved into something more serious. In 2012, Christina gave birth to their daughter. At first, it appeared Melo wanted a stable family life together, but there was a major problem. He was already married. Eventually, the relationship collapsed completely. Melo ended up taking primary custody of their daughter, while Christina struggled financially and emotionally. Court records later showed she initially did not aggressively pursue custody at that time, which allowed Melo to become the child's primary caregiver. Years later, Christina attempted to rebuild her life. By 2016, she had returned to South Carolina and started working as a veterinary technician. Around this same period, she became close to Bradley Post, a wealthy retired engineer who had once been friends with her father. Despite a large age difference, the two formed an intense relationship. Bradley supported Christina emotionally and financially, especially when she decided to fight for access to her daughter again. And this is where everything began escalating. Christina launched a lengthy custody battle against John Melo. According to court filings, Melo tried repeatedly to portray her as unstable, unemployed, and unfit to parent. But eventually, the courts granted Christina visitation rights. For a brief moment, it seemed she was winning. Then suddenly, in 2020, Melo vanished with their daughter. Christina later discovered through social media that he had taken the child to Italy without her permission. Desperate, she contacted federal authorities and initiated proceedings under the Hague Convention, an international treaty designed to handle parental child abduction cases across borders. Bradley Post funded the entire legal battle. Christina spent months in Italy fighting for her daughter, and eventually, an Italian court ruled in her favor, granting her custody rights. In August 2021, she returned to South Carolina with renewed hope. She announced her engagement to Bradley Post. Friends believed her life was finally stabilizing, but behind the scenes, something ugly was happening. People connected to Christina started receiving disturbing envelopes in the mail. Co-workers, neighbors, even Bradley himself. Inside were printed escort advertisements from Christina's past. The letters included explicit descriptions, accusations about drug abuse, and claims portraying her as dangerous and unstable. Whoever was sending them appeared determined to destroy Christina's reputation completely. The campaign became increasingly aggressive. At one point, advertisements even appeared online offering rewards to anyone who had previously paid Christina for escort services if they were willing to testify against her in court. The harassment terrified her. Christina believed John Melo was behind it, but there was a problem. Melo was still overseas during much of the harassment campaign, making direct involvement difficult to prove. Still, investigators believed the custody war had become deeply toxic, and when Christina was murdered, all attention immediately shifted toward the people closest to her. The morning of the murder, Christina had plans to call Bradley Post after returning home from her interview. But the call never came. Hours later, Bradley drove to her residence. Her car was parked outside. When he entered the house, he found the horrifying scene inside and immediately called 911. The call was chaotic. Bradley sounded panicked and disoriented. He repeatedly mentioned blood everywhere. He also appeared to contact his attorney extremely quickly, something investigators immediately noticed. Naturally, Bradley became one of the first major suspects, as several things didn't fit. There was no forced entry. Nothing valuable had been stolen, and Christina had clearly fought back against her attacker. Under her fingernails, investigators recovered DNA evidence from the killer. Meanwhile, detectives canvassed the neighborhood searching for surveillance footage. And then the case took a major turn. A nearby Ring camera captured a mysterious figure near Christina's home shortly before the murder. The man wore dark clothing and carried a backpack, but most disturbing of all, he was holding a bouquet of roses. Only minutes later, the same man was seen leaving the area on a bicycle while wearing a medical face mask. The footage instantly horrified investigators. The killer may have literally brought flowers to a murder scene. The case exploded across local media. Residents of Greer were terrified. Christina's co-workers described her as warm, compassionate, and deeply devoted to animals. Many struggled to understand who could commit such a brutal crime against her. Then the DNA results returned, and investigators found no match in the national database. The killer had no criminal history. At this stage, detectives began considering another theory. What if the murder had been orchestrated by someone else? As they dug deeper into the custody battle, investigators uncovered disturbing allegations involving Christina, Bradley Post, and Christina's daughter. Court records revealed that after Christina regained visitation rights, the child allegedly made troubling statements to her father about inappropriate behavior occurring inside the home. Those claims had previously been dismissed in court due to insufficient evidence, but investigators now wondered whether John Melo genuinely believed his daughter was in danger. That question would lead detectives directly to a 29-year-old pianist named Zachary David Hughes. At first glance, Zachary Hughes looked nothing like a murderer. He had no criminal record. He was known as a gifted musician. Friends described him as intelligent, polite, and compassionate. He taught music online to underprivileged children around the world. He had even attempted military service before an injury ended that path. But detectives soon learned Hughes had become extremely close to John Melo. In fact, Melo listed Zachary as his emergency contact. According to witnesses, the relationship between the two men intensified rapidly during 2020. Melo reportedly viewed Hughes almost like a son, and Hughes became emotionally invested in the custody battle involving Melo's daughter. Investigators pulled license plate reader footage from Greenville County. On the day Christina died, Zachary Hughes' pickup truck was captured on camera near her home. In the back of the truck was a bicycle matching the one seen in the ring footage. Then detectives discovered something even more suspicious. At the exact time of the murder, Hughes's phone had been placed into airplane mode. Police obtained a warrant and searched his home. Hughes remained calm throughout the encounter. He cooperated physically but refused to answer questions without an attorney present. Initially, investigators still lacked enough evidence to charge him permanently. Then the final DNA results arrived. The DNA beneath Christina's fingernails matched Zachary Hughes. The seemingly impossible case suddenly became very real. Investigators now believe the talented young pianist had personally stabbed Christina to death. But why? When forensic experts examined Hughes's phone, they encountered encrypted messaging applications and additional security software, often associated with military-grade encryption. Recovering information became extremely difficult. Still, investigators managed to uncover fragments of conversations between Hughes and John Melo discussing harassment campaigns against Christina. Prosecutors eventually concluded that Melo had manipulated Hughes emotionally, convincing him Christina's daughter was in danger. But the story was about to become even darker. During forensic analysis of Bradley Post's phone, the same phone investigators seized on the day Christina's body was discovered, detectives reportedly uncovered disturbing child exploitation material. Suddenly, the allegations everyone previously dismissed no longer seemed impossible. According to later court filings, investigators believed evidence recovered from the device supported some of the child's earlier claims involving inappropriate conduct inside the home. Separate lawsuits were later filed connected to these discoveries, including one involving another child. The entire narrative surrounding the case changed overnight. To some people, Christina transformed from victim to participant in something horrifying. To others, none of that justified murder. And that became the central question hanging over the trial. Was Zachary Hughes a cold-blooded killer manipulated into violence by John Melo, or did he genuinely believe he was protecting a child? Before trial, the judge ruled that allegations involving Bradley Post and Christina would not be presented to the jury because Hughes reportedly learned much of that information after the killing had already occurred. Prosecutors argued the murder was premeditated regardless of any later discoveries. In February 2025, Zachary Hughes finally stood trial for murder. The prosecution carefully laid out the evidence piece by piece: the ring footage, the bicycle, the truck, the DNA beneath Christina's fingernails, the encrypted messages, the phone records. Everything pointed directly at him, but the defense introduced a shocking claim. According to Hughes, John Melo had offered him money to kill Christina. Initially, Hughes claimed he refused, but over time, after hearing repeated accusations involving the child, he became convinced the danger was real. Eventually, he decided to act. Then came one of the most explosive moments of the trial. Despite strict court orders, Hughes referenced allegations involving Bradley Post and Christina directly in front of the jury. The prosecution immediately objected. The judge ordered the statement stricken from the record, but the damage was already done. The courtroom had heard it, and the disturbing secret at the center of this entire case was now impossible to ignore. In February 2025, Zachary David Hughes was convicted of murder and first-degree burglary.
A jury found Zachary Hughes guilty in the murder of Christina Parcell.
As to the charge of murder, we, the jury, find the defendant guilty.
He received life in prison plus additional concurrent sentences. John Melo was later charged separately for allegedly encouraging and facilitating the events leading to Christina's death, including solicitation-related charges connected to the murder plot. But even after the convictions, This case continues dividing public opinion. Some see Christina Parcell as a woman brutally murdered while trying to rebuild her life after years of instability. Others believe the custody battle uncovered something deeply disturbing hidden behind closed doors. And then there's the most chilling part of all. The killer didn't fit the profile anyone expected. He wasn't a violent criminal. He wasn't a career offender. He was a gifted pianist with no criminal history, caught on camera arriving with roses before committing one of the most brutal murders South Carolina had seen in years. A murder driven not by robbery, not by jealousy, but by the belief that he knew a secret too horrifying to ignore. And whether that belief was manipulation, delusion, or something much darker, one woman still ended up dead on her living room floor.